Hello, I'm Scott Barnett, and welcome to Spotlight On, the show that highlights people of interest to your local cable area. Today with me on our show is Representative Bruce Morrison of the 3rd District, and I'd like to welcome you to the show, and thank you for being here.
Thanks a lot, Scott. It's my pleasure to be here.
Well, I'd like to start off on a little personal note. We'll find out a little bit about yourself and where you got started. Now, you graduated from Yale Law School in 1973 and then worked for New Haven Legal Assistance. Did you move out of college right into legal aid out of necessity because it was, say, the only job there, or did you have a particular interest in that yourself?
No, actually, I really wanted to work in a legal services program. I had originally been studying chemistry before I went to law school and had changed my mind about what I wanted to do because of work that I had done in the community and with people and advocating for people's rights. So it was important to me to find a legal job where I could really be working at the grassroots level in the community. And while I was at Yale Law School, I began working at New Haven Legal Assistance as a student intern and worked there really a large number of hours each week and found that it was very stimulating work. I thought it was very important that the people I was working with really needed the help. So I was very pleased to be able to get that job when I left law school.
All right. Now, you were named director in 1976. Can you give us an idea of some of the problems running an organization like that runs into and stuff like funding and things?
Yeah. Well, legal services programs have been chronically short of money. It's a program that has built a lot of support in the community, but the need for legal representation of low-income people, we focus not on criminal cases but on civil cases like consumer disputes and landlord-tenant problems with the government. We found that we had 4 or 5 or 6 eligible cases for each one that we could actually accept and help. So there was never enough money, and more than that, we had to decide which cases to take, how to run a system in which we would fairly decide who it was that was going to get the benefit so that our resources would be used most effectively, so we get the most bang for the buck, if you will. And that was a real management challenge, and that was one of the real challenges of being the director.
Mm. Now, did the established law community, say the people that I go out and pay for a lawyer and stuff, did you find that they had any kind of attitude about legal services for the poor and stuff like that? Like as if, you know, it shouldn't be funded or it should be lesser? Do they have any kind of...
Well, I think that you have to look at that in historical terms. When legal services for the poor was first brought into the modern era in the early 60s, and the New Haven area was one of the leading areas in the country, did it with Ford Foundation money, and there was a fair amount of hostility in the local bar. Some of it was just fear of the unknown. Some people felt that business was going to be taken away. Other people thought it just wasn't a proper function for anybody but the Bar Association to be doing that sort of thing. But over time, I think that the program built a lot of credibility by doing a good job and by hiring people as lawyers who worked hard and gained respect in the community. And I'm sure you can still find people who think it's the wrong idea or don't like one or another of the lawyers. But as a general idea and program, I think it has the broad support of the bar.
Well, now that you're in a position where you can possibly influence some of the solutions to these problems, what kind of solutions do you think can help legal aid?
Well, obviously, as a congressman, there are many different things that I face as problems, and legal services is only one of them. But I think it is one of the most effective social programs that we've had because it helps people help themselves. And that kind of a program, I think, is more helpful than one that creates dependency. I'm on a committee that has jurisdiction over the Legal Services Corporation, which is the national program, and I've been working to try to improve the set of laws under which that program works and to improve the funding that's available. The Reagan administration cut the program back by about 25%, and this year we have proposed to restore some of that money to the program.
Okay, now after many successful years as director of that, Bruce Morrison Legal Services Director becomes Bruce Morrison Congressman. Why?
Well, really the same reason that I went into legal services and went to law school in the first place. I'm motivated by what goes on in the community, and I care a lot about the kind of policies we have as a country, whether it helps the average person to achieve a more comfortable and better life, or whether the policies the government has get in the way. So I did that kind of work for one segment of the community in legal services and hope to do it for a broader group. I don't very much agree with the kind of national policies that the Reagan administration has pursued, and I felt that you could talk about that or you can try to do something about it, and it was an opportunity for me to get into the fray and try to do something directly as an elected official.
Now, at the time when you ran, your opponent seemed quite formidable at the time. Is there any, not techniques, but platform and stuff that you used to get by him and get the voters out?
Well, there's no question that when I started to run, people thought it was perhaps a fool's errand and that it was a long way to go and was unlikely to succeed. Techniques required really reaching the people, and I think I ran a very much of a grassroots campaign, and I think I spoke to the issues that people really were concerned about, jobs in particular. The idea that the opportunity to work in a good job and to advance and to have some job security and thereby economic security is something that I think is shared by almost everyone, and I think there was broad agreement in the election that the policies of the Reagan administration were negative as to people's ability to look for economic and job security. And obviously the concern about Social Security was an important issue in my race, and I think I gave people some solace that I knew what I was talking about Social Security, would be a real defender of that system. And finally there were concerns about the nuclear arms race that were very important in my race. I've spoken out strongly against the runaway arms race and hope we'd bring some common sense to our policy in that area.
Now, in the past, lawyers became the lawmakers and such. Now there's a lot of businessmen, farmers and such that are becoming congressmen, senators, and even presidents and such.
Even actors.
Right, even actors. How do you think your experience as a lawmaker experience as a lawyer has helped you as a lawmaker?
Well, I think the kind of lawyer I was, working at a grassroots level in the community, has been important because the kind of that work that I did there involved relating to the problems of people, being an effective advocate, knowing how to negotiate. Those are all skills that you learn as a community lawyer that are important to you when you're trying to represent people in a legislature. So I think the skills I had, while they're not the only source of those skills, have been very helpful. And I think knowing something about the law doesn't hurt when it comes to drafting laws and understanding laws that have been drafted.
Now, is there a typical day for a congressman?
Well, I have two kinds of days, in a sense. I spend about half my time in Washington, about half my time back in the 3rd Congressional District. When I'm in Washington, a typical day starts about 8 o'clock in the morning, usually with some kind of a breakfast meeting, and goes on through a series of meetings with constituents, meetings of committees, and action on the floor of the House of Representatives. And then interspersed with that, I'll meet with my staff to try to go over the mail that I've gotten and also to work on particular legislation that we're working on. When I'm back in the New Haven area, I will try to visit functions where a lot of my constituents may be, and I will try to have individual meetings with people who have particular problems. I'll try to get out into Wallingford and the various communities that I represent, meet with business people, meet with local officials, meet with labor unions and community and civic organizations. It's generally a being out and about, seeing what's happening, being seen by people so that they know who their congressman is.
All right, keeps you very busy.
It sure does.
Okay, we'll be back to talk more with Congressman Bruce Morrison right after this short break. Welcome back to Spotlight On. I'm talking with Congressman Bruce Morrison of the 3rd District. What is your opinion on the lawmaker's responsibility to the public as opposed to voting your conscience and what the public feels on a particular issue and such? You know.
Right. Well, that's a frequent question. I think the first thing that ought to be said about it is most votes are not a matter of black and white principle, and the world is gray, and on most issues there could be a difference of opinion, and there usually is. There usually are two sides to the question. It is not just a question, I think, for a representative to blindly vote what he thinks his constituents think, because first of all, he has many constituents, and they have varying views, and they run across the spectrum. And he never quite knows what they are. In one sense, he may hear from the more vocal of them. And beside that, people's views are changing, and in many ways, what people think about an issue depends on what they're told. I think that a representative is a leader. I think he has a job to inform people, and then to listen to what they have to say, and try to reach kind of an ongoing communication in which he's pursuing what he thinks is the best course in light of what he is hearing from the people he represents, and in light of what he's also learning as a representative. Not so much specialized knowledge as just focus on the problems. Most people have too much to do in their lives to be spending every day focusing on the problems. Our job as congressmen is to actually learn those things in detail. So it's really a balance. Occasionally, there may be matters of moral principle in which you would get a poll that says 80% of your constituents feel this way, but you, as a matter of moral principle, feel the opposite. And that's a very rare instance. But in that case, I think you have to vote your conscience, because if you don't respect your own conscience, how could you be respected by the people you represent? If you're out of step on those kind of questions all the time with your constituents, then they've picked the wrong person for their congressman, and they'll probably vote you out of office. But I haven't sensed that kind of a difficulty myself.
Right. Now, you seem very visible as a congressman, as opposed to previous congressmen in this area. Do you think that's part of what you've called your base building, or is that actually just comes along with the job itself?
Well, I hope I'm doing a good job in that regard. I think it's one of the nice things about a congressman is that his area of responsibility in terms of the number of people he represents is sufficiently small that he can really be visible and get to be known by a large number of the people he represents. So I represent 16 towns. I'm able to visit those towns on a regular basis, to be around in the district every weekend and some days during the week, and to meet with a really wide range of people. Obviously that helps in terms of people's support of me in another election, but it more importantly helps me to do a job. It helps me to understand who I'm representing and encourages people to talk to me, because it's the communication back and forth that really informs good representation. I want people to come to me if they have concerns, if they have problems, if they have ideas, and if they see me, they'll understand that I'm accessible and somebody that they can come and talk to.
Now, your constituency is one thing, but how about in terms of, like, say, more on national issues? Special interest groups do play a big role here. Now, as a freshman, what is your attitude and ideas on special interest groups?
Well, there's nothing wrong with special interest groups. We all belong to many of them, and we all have our special interests, which I suppose means our particular interests because of the business we're in or where we live or whatever. But the problem is that the public interest or the national interest or the common interest is not just the summation of special interests. It's really something separate. And it is the most important thing. Special interests can play a role, but overall we should pursue a policy that's the best for the most, I guess is how I would put it. Special interest organizing is fine. Special interest money has become a problem. Elections are very expensive. The election laws have promoted the formation of political action committees by all these special interests, and in many ways that power of that money is too strong. The average person should not feel that his vote doesn't matter because somebody is giving you a big campaign contribution. I support public financing of campaigns for that reason. I think that's the only way in which you're going to free the political process from the kind of special interest money. It's one thing if people say, we're going to tell all the members of our organization that not to vote for you because we think you're wrong on this issue. Maybe you can persuade them one way or another. If they say, well, we're going to give $10,000 to your opponent, that kind of a threat multiplied by many groups can become a cancer, a kind of legalized bribery. I think it's wrong, and I hope to maintain my independence from it. But unless there's some other source of funding, like public financing, it's very hard to do.
Right. Now, how about the influence of some of these groups on issues, say, of national security, like the military-industrial relationship? Do you think that's played up too big, or is it a problem?
It is a problem. It is not the only problem. That problem exists in other areas beside the military budget. But there's no doubt that a huge industry is supported by a military budget that's well in excess of $200 billion a year. That's a tremendous amount of money. It's a tremendous number of jobs. And people will do things to try to protect those economic interests. I think that we have to decide those questions first on what's good for the country, what the country needs, before we decide the issues of where we're going to build these things. I will take a backseat to no one in fighting for getting the jobs and the contracts in my district, but that ought to come after we've decided we do need the particular thing that we've decided to buy.
Right. Now, you've mentioned, you've suggested local politics as an alternative sometimes to the way policy is made in Washington, and if you can't change it there, possibly work on the local level. How effective do you think local organization, especially with funding cuts and such, can be to change the tide, or at least
Well,
make
I
a
don't think
dent?
that we have taken enough advantage. People who are concerned about the way things are have not taken enough advantage of the power of the ballot box. I think my election demonstrated that somebody who was relatively unknown and new to political life, and I hope viewed as somewhat different, maybe a breath of fresh air, could be elected. There's obviously luck that goes with it. It's not something you can be guaranteed of. But there are a lot of people out there who don't vote, who aren't registered to vote. If people want to change things, the first thing they ought to do is get people registered and convince them to vote. Just voting won't change things as fast as many people would like. Not voting at all is a guarantee that you're not going to have any impact.
Now, if you could sum up one major project or concern of your own that you'd like to get accomplished, what would it be?
Well, I want I'm on the housing subcommittee of the banking committee, and I'm very concerned about what our housing policy is, because we are quickly coming to a point where the average American family cannot afford a home and cannot rent a decent place to live. We're going to have to change that. The American dream sometimes gets laughed at, but the American dream has been a pretty powerful force for a better country. One of its central things has been a home that people could acquire, something that they could share and hold within their family. And that's a very strong force for stability and happiness in society. And I hope to use my role in the banking committee, subcommittee on housing, to bring us back to a day where that's more possible.
That's good. Okay, we'll be back in a moment with more from Congressman Bruce Morrison. Next year.
Well, we're just in the process of trying to pay off the last of the debt from last. I had a $145,000 deficit when I finished last time, so that's still being paid off, and then we're just about at the point of starting to raise money for 84. It's a never-ending.
Yeah, I can imagine. We're back on Spotlight On with Congressman Bruce Morrison, and you mentioned legalized bribery in terms of campaign contributions from larger groups and such. How about limits on the amount spent? What do you think about that?
Well, I think there ought to be those limits if we can figure out a good way to do them. The Supreme Court has thrown a monkey wrench into that by saying that that money spent for for political campaigns is like free speech, and you can spend as much as you want. And if you have a lot, you can spend all that you have. That's created a problem of designing a rule that makes sense and is still within the Constitution as the Supreme Court has interpreted it. That's why I'm such a supporter of public financing. Only by giving people some public funds can you regulate how much they spend. People will always be free to go separately from the public financing system, but if it's a good, solid public financing system with a certain amount of matching funds from small contributors, and then you could start imposing some limits. Maybe there'd be some free media time that would go along with it. And there is a bill pending right now that I'm a co-sponsor of called the Obie bill, after Dave Obie of Wisconsin, who's the major sponsor, that would put together a combination of public financing and spending limits, and also contribution limits from groups like political action committees, that I think the exact bill may have to be changed to get it passed, but the idea is a good one.
Now, in your time in Washington, has your attitude on certain issues that you support, say like the nuclear freeze and the opposing the MX situation, has any of your experience of being on the inside and seeing some of the reports and such that come through on say what the Soviet Union does and such changed your attitude at all, or at least?
Well, I certainly feel that the combination of being close to the information and being able to spend full time learning about the various issues has broadened my understanding of a lot of issues. It hasn't changed my view on any important issue that was a part of my campaign. In fact, the briefings that I participated in on the MX missile persuaded me more strongly than I had been persuaded when I started that this was a real mistake. Because the people who were talking about it from the standpoint of as a weapon really couldn't justify it as a weapon, aside from its destabilizing effect in terms of arms control. Just as a weapon itself, we learned that 99 out of the 100 MX missiles would be wiped out in a Soviet first strike. So it really is not something that's going to make us more secure unless we use it first, and that's not something that I believe in, and I don't think the American people do. So it depends on what the subject is, but in that area, in terms of arms control, what I have learned has convinced me more strongly than ever that we need to pursue a sensible arms control strategy.
Now, earlier this year, the President suggested a plan in which laser or nuclear weapons might be used in space and such in this sort of Star Wars scenario. What's your opinion on that, and how far along is it actually, the plans with the military and such?
Well, there's some things been done, and we have tried, several of us, to pass some legislation to stop the anti-satellite warfare kinds of activities. It's very dangerous. The important thing to understand is that no one is winning the arms race, and no one is going to win the arms race. It's a back and forth. We can all spend more and more, and we can get things that are more and more sophisticated, but these things don't make us safer. If we are able to knock out somebody's spy satellites, gee, that sounds like a good thing. But our ability to spy, if you will, or to have surveillance over the other country is really stabilizing. It tells us whether they're doing something that we want to counter, whether we want to object that they're testing some new rocket, whether we would know in time that there was some kind of a launch that we could take some kind of deterrent action. The fact that we know those things leads to deterrence and stability. The Star Wars approach, it seems to me, is an ill-begotten idea. We'll spend a lot more money, and we're liable in the end to make the world even less secure than it is now.
You mentioned housing as one of your domestic pet projects. How do you think that relates, and also our treatment of minorities and the urban poor into that problem, and also keeping social unrest down? Now, you mentioned earlier to me that you were involved with the march in Washington and such. What is going there? What's happened in civil rights, and where are we going?
Well, I think that we've really taken a number of very bad steps backwards under the Reagan administration with respect to how we treat the average person, not just the poor. We've really cut back on social spending without regard to whether it was good or bad, whether it was effective or not. We've cut back on nutrition programs just at a time when so many people are out of work that many people are actually starving in our country, which is a wealthy and rich in food. We've cut back on educational funds, and at a time when everyone agrees that we need an educational system that needs to be rebuilt in order to meet new challenges in the economy and in the world. With respect to civil rights, we've really had the Reagan administration undermining the kind of respect for economic opportunity for minorities and for women. What we want, I think, is to give people opportunity so they can become self-sufficient and participate in our country. That is what the civil rights movement has been about, not giveaways and not unfairness, but giving people a fair chance. And that's where the Reagan administration has been so unfair in trying to take that chance away.
Well, do you think that your party has a candidate or can come up with a candidate that can adequately meet the needs of the poor?
Well, I think the Democratic program in 1984 will be an effective one looking to the future, to rebuilding prosperity, rebuilding fairness, and rebuilding the American dream of economic opportunity for the average person. No one candidate at this point is necessarily the one that can do it, but I think that each of the Democratic candidates have many strengths, and that the party, through its primary process, will select a candidate to really be an alternative to Reagan's destruction of what the American dream for the average American family has been about. And that's what I hope we'll be offering in 1984.
Do you have a particular candidate you...
No, I don't. I have not yet decided to support a candidate, and I'm going to wait and see how they develop, because I think it's critically important that we put together a program that speaks to the American people's concern about insecurity in their own lives in the future. Will they be able to buy a home? Will they be able to have a long-term job? Will Social Security be there when they're ready to retire? Those are the concerns that are on people's mind, and I hope the Democratic candidate will speak forthrightly and effectively about those.
One last question. What's the most satisfying thing you've had happen since you've done since you've been in Congress?
The most satisfying thing is really playing an important role on a number of different issues, even though I was just a freshman. Being selected as chairman of the caucus of freshman Democrats, and then being able to use that position to change the way the jobs bill was worded so that it would help my area of the country more, and being able to play that kind of leadership role, say, on the way in which the third year of the tax cut was handled. So I feel that I've been able to be effective and also to play a leadership role, even though I'm brand new in the Congress.
Well, I wish you luck next year in your re-election bid, and I'd like to thank you for being on Spotlight On. Well, that's our show for today, and I'd like you to keep on watching Spotlight On, because next month we'll have another person of interest to your local cable area. Thank you.